Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Sword Art Online light novel review. This one's going to be for volume 17, which is called Alicization Awakening. So this is the second last volume of the main Alicization arc. As I said before, I believe 19 and 20 are still Alicization related, but they're more side stories rather than being like part of the arc full stop. But anyway, that means we have just one more to go after this, so everything in this volume is really building up to the finale, but I think saying that almost does this volume a disservice, because this volume is action, plot reveal, character moments. This is just as much a part of the finale as the next book, in my opinion. This isn't just all set up, this has its huge moments as well. And in that sense, this is a very difficult book to talk about because pretty much something new is happening every 10-15 pages. There's so many different battles, next stage of the battle. This character's now entered the underworld. Now this group is in the underworld. This character's come back out but come back in. Everything is happening here. There's big reveals, answers for stuff that we've kind of been waiting to see within the arc. And pretty much everyone is getting their chance to shine. So obviously, like Asuna came in the previous volume. This arc, based on the cover, obviously, as you can see, is clearly focused on the idea of Sinon and Lifa come into the game. But, like I said, so many other players come in. So even Klein gets a little bit of a chance to shine. Not as much as Sinon or Lifa, but he gets his moment. Lisbeth also has her moments in this one as well. And then on some of the kind of newer characters, you still have a lot of the Integrity Knight characters around. You have a lot of the Dark Forces generals around. And because of the direction that the book takes, they suddenly become more kind of hero characters in a way. They more or less turn the side. That was the setup at the end of the last volume, that more and more of the remaining Dark Territory generals were beginning to turn against Vechta because he didn't seem to care about them. But on the Dark Territory side of things, the Seal of the Right Eye basically is determined by if they can break free of the one rule they have. They don't have the taboo index. Instead, they have that they must follow the strongest person on that side of things. So we were beginning to see that with the orc leader, the pugilist leader, that they were getting close to breaking that right eye seal. And that's what we get in this book, is effectively the story shifting from being about the Dark Territory versus the human forces within Underworld to it being much more now about most of the hero characters protecting everyone within the Underworld. Now that more and more human characters are entering this game, it's about just protecting this world from the sort of chaos that the villain human characters are trying to inflict on it. So we obviously have Gabriel Miller and Visago primarily in there, obviously causing a lot of chaos there, trying to get Alice out. But the plot point that was brought up from the end of the last volume was that Critter, who is like the tech guy for Gabriel Miller, sent out this post online for American MMORPG players to take part in this test, basically. This brand new test server for this brand new game where you can actually kill human characters, because usually that is not a part of most MMORPGs, so there's a certain appeal for players to get involved in a game where you can actually, kill human characters and everyone's not like a fairy or something like that. So that's the core of the start of this book, is that pretty much for the most part the battle with the Dark Territory is over. It's a losing fight. Basically, Vechta makes his final move and just dives in on his dragon to take Alice, which he manages to do, and he heads off for the World End Altar. Bercoli ends up pursuing him, and later on Sinon pursues him. And that basically means that he has completely given up. He has sacrificed the Dark Territory army. And this is when, with him gone, the pugilist leader, who was a pretty cool character introduced in the last volume. Basically, he doesn't break the seal of the right eye. Instead, what he does is he actually just rips out his eye. So he breaks it himself without actually like breaking it in the right way. But it effectively allows him to sort of act a little bit more on his own. You can definitely tell that this character has moved from just being a sort of standard underworld citizen to actually getting towards becoming the sort of Alice AI type thing. And he begins to sort of formulate the sort of the sort of loopholes around where, like, okay, Vechta's left, so he hasn't given me any specific orders about this, or this. So I'm actually going to just help you guys until he comes back. But just be aware that if he does come back and give me a direct order, I will have to follow him. So it's a pretty interesting situation for most of the Dark Territory characters in this book, where until we get to the one character who does break the seal of the right eye, they're all kind of beginning to just naturally turn because of what's going on here, highlighting the fact, again, that in the same way that most of the Integrity Knights and the Underworld citizens are Fluctlights, artificial AIs, all the Dark Territory characters are the same way. So that's the big thing as the Americans basically come in. They're logged in as basically these Dark Knights who are all wearing red armor, and they're all relatively high level. There's just so many of them, and effectively, I think initially 30,000 of them come in, and it's a huge turning point in the battle. And this is where you have like Asuna stepping up to defend them, but they're still getting overwhelmed because, again, the whole point here is that, you know, Asuna was the turning point initially, but the Integrity Knights are gradually getting ground down. There's only a handful of them, and then the rest of the human forces are just sort of fairly low level sort of man-at-arms type characters. So the heroes don't have a lot of strong forces, like in terms of numbers. So this is where it's so important that Sinon and Lifa arrive in, of course. And the big thing here is that in the same way that Asuna came in as Stacia, one of the goddesses, they also come in as the other two goddesses. So Sinon gets introduced first as Solus, so she has an amazing bow that effectively, she just fires an arrow up into the sky, and then it splits into thousands of kind of light beams and just rains fire destruction down on everyone. And it's just this is her max power god move, basically, that she can only use occasionally, and she just completely turns the battle. And the idea is that one of the abilities that Sinon has as Solus is that she can actually fly. So Asuna is actually like, instead of fighting here, you go after Bercoli and Vechta, who's just taken Alice, because you can fly. That's probably the best place for you to be right now. Asuna says she will lead the sort of the defense here against the remaining American forces. And just before she goes, it's like, wait, where did Lifa go? We both were meant to kind of come in at the exact same point, but she's nowhere to be found. And then, as you start the next chapter, Lifa just suddenly ends up next to the chief of the Orcs, who was the other Dark Territory character who were getting teased, was beginning to turn against Vechta and was beginning to feel the pain in his right eye. And so we get this interesting dynamic here where she's just really, really nice to the character. Let me get his name again. And there's so many names in this book. That's what I'm sort of struggling with a bit here. So his name is Lil Pilin. So he's the chief of the Orcs, and she's just really, really nice to him. Lifa doesn't have any real issue with the different races within the underworld, and that was like a big thing for him, was that he always felt that all humans by default hated orcs and the other humanoid species, and she's just so casual about it and is just like, hey, well, we're talking to each other, aren't we? We're, nice to each other here, so we're basically human. And it's this big turning point as he, just from seeing Lifa talk to him normally and be different than everyone else, he sort of kind of is loyal to her from here on out. And this is when we get the return of the Dark Sorceress woman from the previous volumes ago. Like, what's her name? DL. It's a weird name. Let me get it again. So yeah, DIL. She comes back. Like, she was killed apparently, but it seems like, oh, she's taking Lifa out really early on, and it's weird because like Sinon came in and just took everyone out. Asuna got her big, epic entry. Lifa's just here talking to this orc, and then here she is getting her energy sucked out of her by this dark mage. And this is when they reveal the power of Terraria, who is Lifa. And the idea here is effectively that she has unlimited regenerative healing. So she keeps getting her energy sucked out of her by DLI, who is kind of regenerating her health back. But Lifa just keeps going back to like full HP effectively. And she doesn't want to attack any of the Underworldians at this point. She just wants to wait until she gets to Vechta and the people who have kind of come into the game, the other players basically. But to defend Lilpalin, she does actually end up having to kill DLI, and this just means that Lifa for most of this book is kind of separate from everyone else, gradually moving towards the battlefield with Lilpalin, and you think she's sort of being like skipped out on for most of this book, but then she finally kind of comes back in more towards the end, and there's like a big turning point as like the remaining orcs, the ones who weren't sacrificed, enter the battle, and she enters the battle and gets her really, really big moment. And that you do over the course of this book get Asuna, Sinon, and Lifa in these huge battles where they are just wiping out hundreds of like American players, and then later the Korean and Chinese players who come in at a time. And as the book progresses, like there's so many different stages of the battle that come in, as like the heroes fight back and are on the verge of victory, but then the villains get more players, more of an army, and they're pushed back. The violence level really is pushed up to maximum here, as like you do get moments like early on in the book, Asuna gets her arm cut off. Now, of course, the way an Underworld works, with your kind of power of like imagination and like focusing your will, you can accelerate healing and stuff like that. But you do constantly have her, even though she has this like super account, she is still just one person, so she's getting cut and stabbed all over the place. And the same goes for Lifa and Sinon over the course of the book, that they won't be killed like full on. Their HP will probably never hit 0, but every injury they suffer, they still feel, and they still get like completely stabbed and stuff like that. So it's an interesting dynamic, that what keeps them going is that they have to do this for Kirito. This is the place Kirito did everything to protect, and it to the point where, look at what's happened to him. They can't give up until he's back. He would never give up, so they can't give up. And that's like a constant sort of theme throughout the book, is that it seems like Asuna as the leader is kind of struggling a bit here, and it's remembering that all of this is for Kirito that really inspires her to get her back up and going. Lifa has a similar moment, and Sinon especially actually also has a similar moment. And it's just cool, as of course you have to have like Asuna introduce like more of the real life characters to the Underworld characters, and there's only a few moments of humor in this, and one of them is basically just that like when Sinon arrives, it's just like I think it's Ronye is like, oh, all of his friends from the real world are girls, and it's just like, oh, then that's a pretty funny moment. But anyway, so yeah, they eventually end up, with the support of everyone coming in, manage to like fend off the American players. There is a second wave of American players, so like I think another 20,000 come in at that point. And it's another big kind of back and forth, everyone kind of putting themselves on the line. And this is eventually about the time when we get Klein, Silka, Egil, Lisbeth arriving on the scene. And again, they're seen as like the turning the tide characters, even when the battle shifts back in the other way. And it all leads up to, like, on the other side of the story, you do get the big showdown between Bercoli, since this is one, of course, the Integrity Knight Commander, and Vechta, so Gabriel Miller. It's this big fight. And what's so impressive about it is that they really get across, like, I suppose, Vechta's power, which is that he can basically absorb someone's imagination effectively. Now, incarnation is the word I was looking for there, which is effectively the big power-up that we've always been talking about in Alicization, the idea of, by focusing your will really, really heavily on something, you can actually affect the world around you. And so, with Bercoli, he ends up obviously empowering his sword a lot over the course of the fight. But anytime Gabriel Miller gets near the sword, he just kind of touches it and sort of drains it out of drains that power away. So it's like a counter to what is the obvious power in Alicization. And so Bercoli is at a disadvantage here as he just begins to sort of, slash away at Bercoli. The other effect that this seems to have is that whenever he does the process of draining it from people, it does temporarily disrupt their sort of just like mental facilities. So it's like incarnation is this such inherent thing where you're putting your soul into your blade that, of course, that process being disrupted temporarily is just like, wait, what was I doing? And so Bercoli is getting basically hacked apart because of that. Like, he loses an arm and he's just getting cut apart. And it eventually leads up to the finale of this fight, is that Bercoli, the entire fight, is kind of setting up that, like, oh, my enhanced armament isn't really working. His ability to send the cuts into the future, like he has done a few times before. So we finally get his memory release command here, what Bercoli's ultimate technique is. And it's basically the opposite of what his armament one is. His is the time-splitting sword, so of course his ultimate attack is to send a cut into the past. And it's a really cool setup because he basically remembers, like, the moment he gets his arm cut off, he begins to count from that point on and keep track of where Vechta is in terms of physical space. And he counts, and as the fight goes on, he's still very powerful, of course, Bercoli, so he still manages to dodge Vechta, stay alive, and you get this count just going on all the way up to 600. And then when it finally hits 600, you get him explaining what his power is, which is that if he knows the point at which someone was 10 minutes ago, and he aims his ultimate attack at that point, it will hit them as if they were in the past and instantly kill them. They basically say that, full stop. It is an instant kill attack. They say something along the lines of, like, it doesn't even, like, register as, like, hit points going down. It's just straight up, hit points just turn straight to zero. That's what this ability does. And so it seems like Vechta might have managed to dodge this by sort of disrupting Bercoli's kind of brainwaves, but he just delays it a little bit more. His dragon comes in, sacrifices itself for him, and it seems like Bercoli actually does manage to win, in that Vechta is killed. It's just really sudden. Vechta is killed, but in the aftermath, Bercoli also succumbs to his injuries and dies. So Alice is sort of left out there alone initially, and then when she wakes up, she finds, of course, that Bercoli, who at this point they've committed to the idea that, she always calls him uncle, but that he knows that Alice wanted him to sort of be a father figure to her, and he sort of accepts that. And it's kind of, as Alice wakes up to find him dead, she sort of accepts it as well, that he was effectively her father. So just a nice moment in the end. They also, immediately after this, cut over to Finatio Synthesis 2 to reveal that in the sort of time between, like, Administrator being defeated and all this crazy stuff happening, he had actually started Bercoli had started a relationship with Venatio, and that Venatio is actually pregnant, which was kind of a, like, I knew that was obviously the relationship that they were kind of hinting at, but I didn't expect him to just be like, whoa, it happened already, it is a thing. And she just kind of commits to the fact that, like, you know, I will be the one to guard over your child and stuff like that. So that's going to be an interesting one to follow. We don't get too much focus on, like, Dusselbert and Venatio, just that they're sort of guarding, like, the rear line. Now, ultimately, they're not used particularly much over the course of this book, because the battle shifts from it being like, will the Dark Territory take over the Human Empire, to just it being more about real world VMORPG players coming in, not knowing the full story, and just wanting to participate in this game and just basically killing whoever they were told to kill. So it becomes more of a sort of chaotic battle than a tactical battle, so they're sort of not really used much in the battle. It's at this point Sinon arrives, so she's too late to take part in the battle, but she does reveal to Alice at this point that yes, he defeated Vechta, but we know that he is pretty much a real world person like us. So he hasn't actually been killed, he's just going to come back in a different form. I'll wait here for his next login, basically. Alice, you go on your own to the World End altar, because there's still this sort of, you know, question overall is that ultimately this is where they have to go either way. The point is to save Alice in some form. They just don't want Alice to be taken out by, of course, the Americans, effectively. So, this is where we get the reveal of, basically the account switching stuff happens here for both Vizago and Gabriel Miller. So it is revealed that Asuna did actually manage to kill Vizago when she opened up the big crater and he fell down. So he comes out and basically just asks Critter, switch this account over to being an Underworld account and I'll go back in. The second he finds out that, oh, Asuna was the one who did that, or he calls her the Flash specifically, that means all of the others must be in there. This is going to be fun. And the tease here is, of course, the account that he gives to Critter starts with SAO. So this is his SAO account he's finally going in on, and as the book progresses, you do find out that here he is, finally, full on 100% confirmation. Vizago is the leader of Laughing Coffin, POH, Pooh, whatever pronunciation it is, I'm not sure about it, but the leader of Laughing Coffin, who was never killed in the game, never really discovered what happened to him. We now find out it's all connected together now at this point. And then the other one for Gabriel Miller is that the account he goes in on is as Subtilizer. So this was pretty much set up that, you know, previous bullet winner Subtilizer from America, it is Gabriel Miller. He comes in, so the Sinon and Subtilizer fight is set up is really, really cool, because the idea is that Sinon was kind of helpless in the previous time to defeat him. This is going to be different. So a lot of very, very cool stuff happening here. I suppose where to next, in a way. We do get a plot going on in the Ocean Turtle, which is basically that through them monitoring what's happening, they do notice some activity from Kirito when Sinon meets him. So Sinon does get to see Kirito, and they notice a sort of brain activity sort of spike. And it's at this point like Rinko and Higa go back and forth and basically figure it out, and I think it's really well written, the idea of effectively what is a Floodlight, what is a person, and for Kirito, like, what has he lost and what does he need to get back? And they basically, like they described before, the idea is that his ego has sort of been destroyed. So the sort of nature at a core of like who he is gone, and all that's left is sort of just the base core desires that are just integral to who he is. But most of the core of Kirito is gone. So what he needs to get back is what he was missing, and he's clearly getting a little bit of that back through just interaction with being around Asuna, being around Sinon. So they figure out the idea of, well, in a way, like, can a person themselves ever truly sort of like recreate themselves? And the answer is like no. But you can more or less sort of recreate someone from the memories of the people close to them. That's probably the best way to actually do it. And they basically get across the point that, wait, Asuna is Kirito's girlfriend. She's probably the closest person in the world to him. Leafa is his sister, and then he shared a very, very crazy kind of event with Sinon. These are three of the most important people in Kirito's life. Their Fluchtlights and their memories of Kirito, they can sort of restore what he lost from their Fluchtlights, and that would make him whole again. So the plan is that Higa figures out, okay, it's going to be risky, but we're going to have to basically try and sneak a little bit in the other side of things, where the, Gabriel Miller and so are, and basically just find a way to link all of the soul translators together so that they can actually have, Asuna's Fluchtlight sort of have her memory of Kirito sort of be connected to what's lost with Kirito, and the same for Leafa and Sinon. And that's how we're going to get Kirito back. So I really like that explanation, and then it's on this side of things they begin to set up that, oh, remember that whole plot point that they brought up, that the idea that there was actually a traitor in Wrath, that the reason the Americans are here is because someone was leaking out the plot. We finally get that here. And we get that as Higa goes to perform this stage of the plan, it is revealed that, what's his name, Yanagi, I think, he is the one who was leaking it. So they basically say that he worked for Sugo, who obviously is Fairy King Oberon. So we've cut back all the way to like the original fairy dance arc here, with the idea of, in a way, he's taking revenge for that, but that the core of what he's about is that he is the one who Administrator contacted in the real world. He is the one who created the code, 871, for the Seal of the Right Eye. He sabotaged the project from the start to, I suppose, give time for the Americans to prepare this kind of attack so that the Japanese wouldn't get it. So that's the reveal here, and it's effectively a Chidelkin type thing here of an Administrator effectively, manipulates him into like promising him like everything, that they'll rule the world together, and he just goes ahead with it. So he ends up just being this kind of absolute fool who just got played by Administrator, who's not around anymore, and he's just out to take revenge for Administrator Sugo, who he used to work for, and so on. Thankfully, Rinko does sense that there is some danger going on after Kikuoka and Rinko figure out the whole Seal of the Right Eye thing and make the connection. And they just kind of knock him out, and the book ends, there's still some stuff to cover in the meantime. The book ends with the idea that Higa makes the connection with the soul translators, and it appears Kirito might be back. That's the tease. He may be back. Because they do this interesting thing of like the last chapter is like 2 pages long, and it's Kirito waking up in a classroom, like not really remembering that much, but feeling like someone's calling him and just like not really knowing what to do. Just thinking that it was a dream, that what was happening. So we're going to have to see what is the final thing now that properly wakes him up from this. Now that on all technical fronts, in a way, he should be able to fight again. But before that, a lot of other stuff still has to happen. So we do get Subtilizer entering the game, and the fight with Sinon. It's really, really intense. Subtilizer has he gets the advantage very early on. Sinon doesn't really know how to handle him. Her fear kind of gets the advantage. Her fear gets in the way, basically, here of what happened last time. But as she manages to avoid his sort of incarnation sucking abilities, basically, she fires back up by effectively remembering that she is fighting for Kirito here. and that, you know, the importance of Kirito to her in terms of he saved her life, and just meeting him changed her life as well, and she will fight for him now. And she does this really cool thing. She changes her bow, her goddess bow effectively, into her main sniper rifle, and like Subtilizer kind of counters this by also, you know, forming a sniper rifle, and they have this really cool like flying sniper rifle battle where they're just, you know, sniping each other's shot, and they're just, you know, I think Sinon takes out his hand. He actually ends up taking out both of her legs. She then kind of gets a shot off where she just fires energy through the sniper rifle and like seemingly kind of gets the advantage over him. And it's just craziness kind of going on as like the book is kind of gradually coming to an end, as you realize that the book is ending on this kind of down note of like all the ups and downs over the course of the fight. It is going to end on a down note, because the other major plot point that's going on is that Vizago logs back in under the POH account, and the next stage, what he sets up on his own to cause like chaos, is that he also sends out a message basically on other kind of countries' servers effectively that, hey, VMO players from China and South Korea, you guys need to help with this, because he basically sets up the Underworld server as like, look, it's Japanese players like wiping out American players. This is an American, South Korean and Chinese server. They're like hacking our server basically and just annihilating us. We need your help. Log on, help us fight. And the idea here is that I think that the author sort of explains at the back of the book that this is like his view on like a few years ago, that there was a little bit more animosity online between like South Korean and Japanese kind of online players, and he was trying to kind of use that to tell the story here. And I think it does work with the idea that fundamentally Vizago, all he wants is chaos. All he wants is people being angry at each other and being willing to kill each other. And as like this big battle comes, and like you can sense that this is going to be finally the defeat, there's really no one else to arrive into the battle at this point. And the hero's kind of last cavalry charge has failed. They are going to lose, and so they get this chance to talk to Vizago, and he reveals that, you know, you think this is revenge for taking out Laughing Coffin during that big incident where like they found out where they were, found out where the Laughing Coffin base was, and it ended up with a huge player massacre. He revealed he was the one who leaked out the information of where it was. He wanted this to happen, and he did it so that the frontline players would kill other players. He wanted to force the situation where the heroes of SAO got blood on their hands, basically, and he's just trying to do the same thing again here by turning this into sort of an international incident. He's trying to create a fundamental rift between American players, you know, Chinese players, South Korean players, and especially really isolate the Japanese players. And that's really the kind of big turning point here, is this final influx of, you know, the 50,000 or so South Korean / Chinese players that is just a step too far. Because, like I said over the course of the book, Asuna has been like getting injured in all of these fights. She's been fighting the entire book. Renly, the young Integrity Knight, who had a really good arc, I think, in the last book, he's been fighting this entire time, because with all of the other knights kind of off doing separate things, he ends up as like more or less the acting commander of like the Integrity Knights, because he's the most like the one most central in the battlefield. It's stuff like that where like you see like the characters begin to go down, like as they reveal that Lisbeth's speech from the very start of the book to try and get more of the ALO players to join in. This is one of the final, group of players comes in. About 2,000 ALO players come in, including the likes of, Sakuya, Alicia Rue, and so on. The kind of guild leaders from ALO. Lords of the territories and stuff like that come in. you get like them getting defeated. Like you have the Sleeping Knights Guild are also in there. What's his name? Eugene from like the Salamanders. You cut to these moments of just Sinon seemingly being defeated, Lifa seemingly being defeated, and now in the main battle, POH has the advantage over Asuna, Klein, Lisbeth, and so on, and that's when they wheel Kirito before Vizago. And this is the moment you've sort of been waiting for, is to see Vizago's reaction to the person that he wants to fight, but Kirito is not there. He obviously like laughs and makes fun of Kirito for the situation that he's in, and just takes Yu-Gi-Oh's sword from him and stuff like that. And he tries to move a bit in terms of try and get the sword back, but Kirito isn't here yet. And finally, like the book ends just on this note of, it's gone really, really bad, and now there is the need, 100%. Kirito needs to come back to turn the tides. And I think the setup is amazing, because you wonder what he is going to do when he comes back. Like, we're hoping it's like dual wielding his own sword plus Yu-Gi-Oh's sword, but they confirm it once again. Yu-Gi-Oh's sword is broken. What do they do? We're still kind of waiting for Alice and so on to see what's going on. We see like Sakuya taken out and so on. It's pretty brutal. And even on like the other side of things, there's the leader of the Pugilists and his relationship with Integrity Knight 12, which they sort of set up in the last volume. They come back to that here, and even that gets a little bit of character focus, as like he doesn't break his right eye seal, but like definitely makes some progress. And she finally, I suppose, realizes that there is more to her than just cutting things. That's been like her defining aspect up to now. She kind of realizes, they both realize that they do actually really like each other, and that she realizes the importance that, wait, I don't want to fight him again to try and cut him. I want to just be around him more, and I don't want to cut him. And so, as they prepare to make their final stand together, they both kind of realize that, if we make it out of this, why don't we just start a family together? And it's like, yeah, and it's just this little romance that kind of happened in the middle of the fight and so on. It was pretty cool. But, yeah, that's pretty much kind of most of the book. Like I said, there's so much going on. I think right towards the end they teased that Renly might be dead, and the way the book ends, it does end on a lot of these kind of fights across the battlefield of it seeming like this character has been actually killed, but they never stick on it long enough to confirm the death. So I suppose we're waiting to see what exactly happens next. But either way, very, very strong volume. I'm very excited for the next one, though it is going to be an interesting race in a way to see, does the next book come out before the anime catches up? I think it will more than likely just about come out, but I think it is going to be close, because there isn't as many volumes in the second half, and I think there's still the same amount of episodes, so it'll be interesting to see how quickly we catch up. But that has been my review for Volume 17 of Sword Art Online, Alicization Awakening. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the book, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.